All right, so this is Joe Glines, and I'm talking with Jack Dunning. And Jack, actually, Jack, so, it's funny because we were chatting a bit before this, but I didn't mention, so, I found your stuff, I'd say about 4 years ago, somewhere in there, where Jackie and I were talking. Jackie Stuck is the guy out of Denmark that does the webinars with me. And we were both envious that you already had a Kindle book, I believe, on AutoHotkey, and then we were excited to see somebody actually was doing something with AutoHotkey. At the time, Jackie and I were the only two that I was aware of that had websites where we were starting to do stuff with AutoHotkey and post a blog and things about it, or at least at a pretty not robust but a steady pattern. Anyway, so he had mentioned your books, and I got your regular expression book, and I worked through that, and I think I got one of your other ones. But I was wondering if you can give me a little bit of background about yourself, your education and focus.
I graduated from the Naval Academy in 1972, and back in those days, all the computers were mainframes. And after I got out of the Navy, I bought my first PC. Well, not a PC. It was actually a super brain, and started a business magazine in San Diego, a local computer magazine, with that machine. And the IBM PC came out during that time frame. The name of the magazine was Computer Edge, and I still use that name for my main site.
Right.
Though the magazine no longer exists, ironically, computers put computer magazines out of business.
Right.
So I ran that magazine for about 30 years before I closed it down. And in the course of doing articles, someone mentioned AutoHotkey in one of the question-answer columns. And that's when I started looking into it. And I was fascinated by the language, and I've always been a Windows fan. And it runs on virtually any Windows machine. So I moved forward with it, and I started, in the magazine, started writing articles about AutoHotkey. And it was out of that, the idea of turning them into books came about. And I pretty much continue to do that now with the blog I have at Jack's AutoHotkey blog, where ultimately they become part of other books, because I tend to pursue a certain, like you purchased the regular expression book.
Right.
Well, I took that on as a task, both to learn how to make use of regular expressions myself, as well as try to communicate to other people how to use them. I figured if I can figure it out, then maybe I can help other people figure it out. And that's not one of the easier topics.
No, it's not. Yeah. Yeah. Especially in a book, honestly. Yeah, I enjoyed the book. Yeah, don't get me wrong. But it's video to me at some things, and that's one of the things where you can demonstrate it so much easier of what's happening. But anyway, so go ahead.
Well, even with that, it can be difficult because of the concepts in regular expressions are not the usual programming concepts that you deal with. So anyway, that's how the books come about. And I think I have 9 books out now.
Oh, really? Wow.
And, yeah. Well, a couple of them are free. And one of them, which is I call Why AutoHotkey, is actually free on Amazon, as well as my sites. And it's an introductory book, and it goes in. What I've tried to do, I don't really do tutorials per se. In a way they are, but they're more verbose, I guess. I try to give more of the nuance of the language and little hints as you go along. But it's, I don't think I could just sit down and write straight tutorials. But one of the things I've always strived to do is give practical application with everything that I talk about. In other words, I went through all the GUI pop-up windows, graphic user interfaces, and every single one of them I tried to think of how could I use this in some practical application, whether it was an egg timer or an address book or a recipe book or something else like that. And I think that that makes it a little easier for people to relate to it if they can see something that they might do in their life. That's what I have in the Why AutoHotkey book. I have a number of different occupations and how you might use AutoHotkey within those. And then the book actually talks about specific applications, many of which I have on my free application site at computeredge.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm not sure what the original question was.
Yeah, well, it was your background and work history, which and kind of what you're doing now. And then which led into the next question was, which you I think already mostly addressed, but how/why did you get started using AutoHotkey?
I just became a fanatic when I saw how easy it was to do things with it.
Yeah, agreed.
And how much you could add to your computer without even trying. And it's just like the autocorrect program that I found on the site there that uses all the most commonly misspelled words.
Yeah,
that's a standard part of my loaded programs.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, it saved me many times. Yeah. I'm actually learning how to spell.
Well, see, actually, I would argue for me, like I'm not, because AutoHotkey fixes it for me, and I see it gets changed, but I don't pay attention to what it was. But it saves my butt. I can say that.
Yeah.
And here's one that I've discussed this a lot with my friends, but I'm just curious. So, why do you think more people don't automate? Not even necessarily why don't they use AutoHotkey, but why don't they automate in general?
I think that even though people use computers regularly, especially on their phones, I think they're still intimidated by anything that smacks of programming at all. And then I think a lot of people just don't have the motivation. They want to get on, they want to do their web browsing or maybe write an email, that type of thing. But the idea of doing more or digging into how I can make it faster or automate, it just either doesn't occur to them or they're just not motivated. I do think it takes a special level of curiosity for someone to actually move forward and do more, and motivation, definitely. Well, ambition, maybe.
Yeah, and the one I would add to that is because I think it's I agree with everything you said. I was just thinking is the understanding or being able to identify that what they just did, they actually do a lot, right? That they think they really do it once, but it's recognizing that pattern of like, I launch my browser, I go to this page, or I launch this program and I open this file, or I double click this thing and that program, so many times. And I think people often think that it's not really that frequent, and yet it truly is. It's amazing how much of our work we do over and over and over.
Oh yeah, and that's where AutoHotkey comes in. Anything that has a great deal of repetition, that's where computers come in, really.
Yeah. So expanding on this, now let's think about, there's the whole general people, the general population out there. There are some people who show interest, come to your site or read your books and show interest in AutoHotkey. And then, of course, only a certain percentage of them will actually end up adopting it and using it on a regular basis. One is, do you have any idea what percent that might be of people that actually show interest and actually end up using it?
I really don't know. I do meet people from time to time say, yeah, I've heard of AutoHotkey, but I don't really know what it is. And I'm I don't think AutoHotkey is really the best name either
No.
for it, because it implies it's nothing but hotkeys, and there's
Right.
so much more
Right.
to it. I think that what has to happen is they have to get involved enough that they say, wow, it's that experience as a programmer when you do something and it actually worked and you're looking for someone to tell because it was such a satisfying experience.
Yeah.
Of course, you can't find anyone, but I think that has to happen where someone said, wow, that worked. And from that point, they get hooked and they start moving forward. But if that doesn't happen, and for a lot of people it won't, or they may not even be able to write a simple hot string and figure it out. So there's a certain threshold there that I think they have to get over. I have no idea what the percentage is, but it's not huge, because if it was, there would be a heck of a lot more people doing it.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing, I'm interested in your thoughts on what I'm about to say. So I worked in the corporate world for 20 years, and I've been using AutoHotkey, I think, for roughly 8 years. And I'm a proselytizer, like you just said. I love it. I love teaching people, like, here it is, check it out. And what I would typically do is I'd say, hey, let's meet for an hour, and I'm going to demonstrate to you, the cool stuff it can do. And so I would outline, probably like 10 to 15 different uses that they probably use in their computer, right? But I would show them how you can use hotkeys, hot strings, web scraping, connecting to other programs, all this stuff. And my question is, because I also did not try to say, now go do all of these things, right? What I typically tried to say was, why don't you just learn either hot strings or hotkeys to start, right? We'll keep it real simple, and then we'll baby step into the other stuff. But I got to say, for my personal adoption rate, it's pathetic of like the number of people that I call it the great thanks by, right? They say, wow, great, thank you so much. That was amazing. And then they just leave, and they never try to, at least as far as I know, they never pick it up and never start learning how to use it. But I'm curious, do you think I might have been better off not showing them all the stuff and just showing them hot strings, or hotkeys alone, and then come back later and keep it focused? So maybe I'm minimizing what they're trying to pick up. I think maybe I overwhelm them.
Well, that's possible, because I definitely agree. You need to start with things like hotkeys and hot strings,
mm-hmm.
which are relatively simple, and you can make something happen with one line of code. But you can definitely get overwhelmed. It's like I have my site of free scripts and apps, and that's a pretty long page, and someone scrolls through that and sees everything you can do. It definitely can be overwhelming. And if someone is starting from scratch, there's just no way they're going to be able to jump right into a lot of those things unless they have a really high logical IQ. And so I kind of agree with you there that maybe if baby steps, you introduce a little bit, make them a little bit hungry, get them going with that, and then later saying, oh, you can turn your hot string into an action hot string or something like that, and do this or add this on. I don't know. Most of the feedback I get from my readers is that at some point they decided to dig into it usually for their own personal business or personal benefit, and once they got hooked, they just kept going. So I don't know as much as maybe you do about the rate of drop off.
Yeah, like I said, I know it for the people, because I had the one-on-one with them, right? And then later I'll run into and ask them, and it was almost always a no, they don't do it. But obviously there's a lot of other people who start using AutoHotkey and then just, I don't think the majority stick with it. What was really weird was, this is about 6 years ago now. I was learning Python because my boss said, "Hey, nobody knows AutoHotkey, and if you get hit by a truck, what happens?" So he wanted me to start doing the stuff in Python. So I said, that's fine. I'll learn Python. And so I'm fortunate here in the Dallas area. There's a Python meetup group that has like 60 people that attend monthly meetings, right? So I was going to these meetings, and because I don't have a background in programming at all, and I was over my head and learning Python stuff, but I would talk to people. I'm like, hey, I use a scripting tool called AutoHotkey, and I do stuff. And I'd say out of the 10 people I asked, at least 5 of them were aware of AutoHotkey and who used it. And what was interesting was all 5 of them no longer used it. And, it was just baffling to me, because to me, there's stuff that I can do in AutoHotkey that is really hard to do in other languages, from my understanding of especially the hotkeys and hot strings, right? Or connecting to a lot of the Windows API stuff. It's not nearly that easy in other languages. But I was fascinated to see there was a lot of people who tried it, but actually, programmers, and then they stopped using it, which blew my mind.
It is surprising. And in fact, it may be that more non-programmers continue using that.
Yeah. Oh, which actually, sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that I have people that like work in transcription, and they've written a great deal of code that is aimed at, whether it's medical or legal transcription, that's aimed at doing that within their business. In essence, they're writing their own tools, so it's helping them. So that keeps them motivated. But if someone's a programmer and they're working in other languages, even though it'd be relatively easy for them to pick up AutoHotkey, I think that it's there's so many other tools that programmers use
Agreed.
that already do a lot of what AutoHotkey would do for them.
Agree. Which actually, that was when I interrupted you earlier, I was going to ask you was, did you ever play with AutoIt?
I played with it just enough to note the difference between AutoIt and AutoHotkey. In one of my pages on my site, I do a comparison, and I show some of the differences in code. Mm-hmm. I think that AutoIt is a lot like, version 2.0 of AutoHotkey, if it ever comes out, where it's moved to functions. And one of the reasons why AutoHotkey got written in the first place was because the original developer wanted hot strings and hotkeys, the simple, easy coding of those things, and AutoIt did not want to implement it.
Yeah.
So he wrote AutoHotkey, and which essentially took a lot of the pieces of AutoIt, but added the hot strings and hotkeys. And interestingly, that's the one thing in version 2.0 which is virtually unchanged, are the hot strings and hotkeys. You have to do that with functions in AutoIt, and that makes everything much more difficult.
Yeah. I did a little with AutoIt, but not much. But from reading, I read a fair amount of people discussing it, and I've talked with other people. And that's the one thing I'll say when I hear most programmers, if you come from a programming background, you will prefer AutoIt over AutoHotkey. If you're a noob and you're not into programming, then it's reversed. AutoHotkey is easier for you than AutoIt.
Yeah, and I think it's primarily because of the simplicity of the hot strings and the hotkeys in AutoHotkey. If you get beyond that, once you understood how the functions work, then I think you'd be fine. Version 2.0, I think, is a little more challenging for the average person. Mm-hmm. It deals with object-oriented programming and completely changes the format of the language.
Yeah, which has its pluses and minuses.
Well, no, actually, overall, I agree that if you were a professional programmer, then you would want something more like version 2.0 or AutoHotkey,
Uh-huh.
because there's a lot of things that are easier. Right now, I'm working on this list view with the legal terms, and I'm doing multiple GUIs, and trying to keep track of the names of the GUIs is a problem. So, whereas this would be resolved easily in version 2.0 of AutoHotkey or AutoHotkey, you wouldn't have the problem.
And actually, that it's off topic a little bit. What editor do you typically use?
Oh, actually, I just use Notepad.
Oh, okay.
Most of the time. I do have Notepad++, but and I do things in that as well. But most of the routines I'm writing are fairly short.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not writing even hundreds of lines of code, much less thousands. So I don't really have the issue. I'm just trying to demonstrate something.
Sure.
So
yeah, I was just because I was a big site user for years and years, and then I started using AutoHotkey Studio, and that is the one thing I'll say about it. It keeps track of your, every word that's in the document. So when you start typing, if it's already been used, it'll pre-populate it for you. And so that remembering the name of your GUI or your variable or whatever, it's so helpful. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that I think Notepad++ will do that too. But I'm not I don't really focus on that much. Yeah. I'm focusing on the material itself, because like I said, I'm not writing huge apps.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, that's why also I still not struggle. I shouldn't say that, because I don't even try. I don't use classes. I might use a class, but I don't write classes. And most of my stuff is that it's less than 100 lines, and I use functions all the time. But
right.
Building a class and some of the stuff, it's like I said, I don't have a background in programming, and from programmers I've talked to, they said, hey, it's a great step forward, but I just don't really have the need. And so, at least I don't think I do. So I haven't really delved into it.
No, I think that most of the apps that I use in AutoHotkey are really short. And when you get into classes and object-oriented programming, you're also talking about a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, especially most of my readers, are really ready for that. That's more for professional programmers.
Yeah. My background's in statistics. And then I started using AutoHotkey, like I said, I think around 8 years ago, and I'd used hot strings and hotkeys for about 3 years. And then I switched jobs and I worked in the internet marketing, and I started to want to be able to do web scraping. And so I started learning object-oriented programming, using the DOM and using IE with COM. And I can't tell you, like it was so confusing and complicated. And then later, when I started learning using COM to connect to Excel and Word and things, it was so much easier, because the web page itself will change depending on who developed it, versus Excel is Excel. I wish I had reversed that order and learned Excel and connecting to Excel and Word and Outlook first, and then the web scraping would have been easier. But yeah, it's a steep learning curve when you're new to object-oriented programming.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely true.
Yeah. So now thinking, I don't know how much insight you'll have into this, but this is one that's really perplexed me, because I've had 2 bosses actually tell me not to automate things, which is bizarre. But I get that the users themselves may not have the skill, and they may not look to automate things, but why do you suppose that more managers, once you realize things can be automated, why isn't it an emphasis, like at the higher ups level, to either tell people to automate it, or at least to stress hiring people who have this kind of a skill set?
Well, I'd say mediocrity is rampant.
That's a great statement.
It's easier just to do things the way they've always been done and not make waves. And sometimes they're afraid that if they hire someone to come in to improve things, they won't really understand what's been done. And then if that person leaves, then they don't know what to do with it.
Right.
Or they don't know how to fix it if something goes wrong, or they don't know how to move forward beyond that. And I think that there is a fear of the unknown, and this is common in organizations in general, where the people aren't super confident themselves, so they don't want people changing things. There is also a fear within management that something that's going to get added to a computer that will end up being a security risk, and that's a pretty reasonable fear. There's a lot of IT groups within companies that won't allow anyone to do anything with their computers.
Right.
And the thing about AutoHotkey is it's something that people can go home and do all kinds of things, but they won't be allowed to do it at work.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a variety of answers to that.
Okay. How about this one? When you're explaining to a person that knows nothing about AutoHotkey, like, if you run into somebody and they ask you what do you write about? How do you explain what AutoHotkey is? I would always start with hotkeys and hot strings, which I would use the example of the autocorrect, where if you type a commonly misspelled word, it can instantly fix it for you. And or if you want to launch a program rather than having to search for it, you can set up a hotkey that will automatically load it. Now, Windows also has shortcuts that you can set up for doing those kind of things, but this just makes it easier, because you don't have to set up a specific shortcut with a specific hotkey combination. And the other thing is that AutoHotkey within Windows has a universality. You can have, say, in Word, maybe Word already corrects a lot of commonly misspelled words. I'm not sure. I don't have any of those. That's one of the reasons why I haven't done more with Excel and the DOM and all that, is because I don't have those products anyway. But so I'm not playing with them. But maybe within Word you can make that change. But with AutoHotkey, it'll work everywhere, whether on the web or in any program that you're running. Notepad and an instant messenger on your computer, So I would say this is probably around, I'm going to guess around 96. I was using Word's auto replace, which is what you just described, where you can type in, like when I type JG, put in Joe Glines, right? So I used that for a couple of years, and it was actually at the time, Microsoft didn't even share those across the different Office programs. So I had to go into Excel and add all my stuff there, and go into PowerPoint and add them all there, all separately, right? It was really a pain. But still, it saved me time. And then I found a program called RoboType, and this is around 99, I think, somewhere in there, maybe a little later. And it was from PC Mag, and it had the benefit that it actually held it at one spot, and it worked like AutoHotkey does across all programs. But that was all it did, was basically like the hot string text expansion. And then around 8 years ago or so, maybe a little longer, I was using RoboType, and I'm like, there's got to be something better. And I Googled it and found AutoHotkey, and then even then for like 5 years, I just stuck with the hotkeys and hot strings, and I was correct too. I was blown away at how much faster and everything I could do. Yet I barely touched the tip of the iceberg of what AutoHotkey can do. Even with everything that I've done and all the books I've written, I still feel like I've barely scratched the surface of what can happen. Yeah, which is it's it's not. I was going to say a plus and a minus because it is a big plus, but excuse me. It's so customizable, right? It's like almost anything you want to do, you can do. And that's where I have a hard, because it's very personal. So it's hard to teach too much stuff, which I think you do a good job. I like I said, the one book I read, that not the regular expression book, but the other one, which I think was on like using hotkeys and just general stuff. You had, quite a few examples of just setting up a hotkey, like to launch a program or to do something, and I think because the tool itself, you can apply it in so many different ways, yet if people don't see something that's really close to how they use it, they have a hard time making that leap and understanding it. And so
yeah,
I think you give a lot of examples which help people see like the pattern. Oh, I can launch anything, oh, I don't want to launch Firefox. I don't have Firefox. No, that's not the point, right? The point is you can launch whatever you want, and you can configure it to whatever hotkey you want. That's the other one. People say like, well, what hotkey is it? It can be whatever you want. That's the beauty. It's what makes sense to you.
Well, even the fact that you can use hotkeys to block Windows shortcuts. This was one of the big problems that I think it was Control W would close a browser window. And if you're in the middle of editing something on the web, so I've blocked that. I think Alt W might have done it as well. I can't remember exactly. Well, that's one of the examples I give in the book. People say, well, why would you want to block shortcuts? Because some shortcuts can be pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's.
I still have one enabled. The insert key, I hate, right? Because I never use it, and when I do, it's not doing. I accidentally hit it, and then I look up, and I'm like, what? What did I do? So I block it entirely, just because I never want to go into that. What is it? Like the type over mode? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I have it blocked too. In fact, I have my caps lock key blocked.
I actually use my caps lock key as a modifier key.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
But it's blocked as a caps lock key.
Yeah.
So because I don't want to accidentally hit the caps lock key in it.
Right.
Though I do have a couple of hotkeys for changing everything to all lower text.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I have an upper, lower, and a title case that I can highlight.
Right.
Yeah.
That comes in handy for editing, especially when people were sending articles and they were putting their headers in all caps.
Right.
So I've used that for a long time.
Yeah. What and so out of all the different functionality for you in particular, right? Like actually I know you do a lot of stuff where you're teaching people how to use AutoHotkey. But as far as scripts you've actually written, what's your favorite like use of it? What do you use most? Like hot strings, hotkeys?
Well, like I did mention, I have the auto correct built in, and that's just a series of hot strings.
Yep.
But there's a few apps that I'm particularly fond of. One of them is I call it Quick Links, and it's just I use the X1 button, the extra button on the mouse.
Yep.
And it pops up a menu that's really based upon the menu is just drawn directly from some directories of shortcuts that I put together. And I use that all the time to launch programs, to open up websites, to open up special the God mode tool. There's all kinds of things that I use that for on a regular basis. Also, I have another one I call Mouse Precise, which will move the mouse one pixel at a time. And it turns the numeric keypad into the cursors on it in 8 different directions. It turns the cursor into just something to move the mouse incrementally that way. Because I have a problem with a mouse when I'm doing graphics getting the cursor right on the exact point that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the 0 key on the mouse pad will pushes the left mouse button down, holds it down while I move to wherever I need to move to, then hit it again, and I've got it selected exactly the way I want it. So I'm fond of that.
Yeah. Back to your menu one. Have you tried QAP from Jean Lalonde? It's quick access pop-up. Yeah, called quick access pop-up.
You know, someone else mentioned, I don't remember what the name of it was. Is it written in AutoHotkey?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I haven't, because I don't spend much time reviewing other people's programs, because my goal is to teach people about AutoHotkey.
Sure. Yeah, I don't blame you.
So, yeah, someone else may have mentioned that one and how great it was, and I think my comment was great. Whatever works for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but
so I used to build my own menu like you were describing, where you can hit a hotkey and it pulls up, and you have a lot of a GUI interface to choose from, right? Where you can open folders or open programs or whatever you want. Excuse me. But he's built in a lot of stuff of it. Also, interacts with the dialog boxes. So if you're in an open or a save window from a program, it'll automatically know that and navigate to that folder for you. It's a very robust tool, but I understand what you're saying. It just, for me, I used to spend hours building my own GUI menu and then updating it and changing it and tweaking it and adding icons and making it pretty. And this tool, it's like drag and drop and a couple clicks and you're done, and it's so much easier to maintain.
Well, this actually, mine's pretty simple, because it just uses Windows directories.
Oh,
and
okay.
all you do is drop shortcuts in there, and it loads from there.
Gotcha.
So if you create a shortcut to either for a web or a program. In fact, recently someone else had adapted it, and so that you could actually open files. You could be in a directory and you could use it to open the file by selecting the program from the same menu. And I did put that change in there. So it was but it's just really simple by comparison to most things. And I'm not trying to. I mean, it sounds like this other app's pretty powerful. And
it is.
Pretty
it's amazing. It's also in 9 languages, I think, which is pretty amazing. But yeah. I understand. Like, it's it's whatever works for you, right? That's the beauty of it, of AutoHotkey. And I honestly, typically, when I find other programs, even though I'll find a way to do it in AutoHotkey, and that way I have the source code, and if I want to change something, I can, right? And that's one thing I love about it.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. In fact, I would recommend most people do that. The only reason I don't do that is that my life is writing about AutoHotkey,
sure,
and I'd have to learn the program in order to write about it.
Yeah.
So, and I can teach most of what I need to teach I try to keep it simple. I try not to add too much to it.
No, and I, like I said, I've read a couple of your books. I think you do a good job of it. I don't think anybody could read that and say, well, you didn't make it clear enough or give me enough examples, right? I mean, you would have to just kind of give up and not be trying to say you couldn't figure it out, because you don't make it where people can fail unless they just don't put any effort. Yeah.
Well, I think there's plenty of people that do give up anyway.
Yeah, sadly, yeah. It's one of my favorite stories I read from, I mean, it's not his, but I learned it from Brian Tracy, where he told a story where this guy is walking through a forest and comes up on these 2 lumberjacks trying to cut down a tree, and they're sawing away and sawing away and sawing away. And the guy says, hey, have you guys sharpen the saw. And they go, oh, we don't have time to stop. We got to cut this tree down. We got to cut this tree down. So they cut and cut. You know, and the moral is like, well, if you actually took time to sharpen the saw, right, you would have been done faster, even though it took you time to sharpen the saw. But it really is that, like, it's amazing how people, like, actually a guy at my past at TI, he was having to import all these languages to 11 different languages onto one survey, but each one, it was going to take him, I would say, like 20 hours of copying and pasting line by line, right? And basically he'd pull up in one browser window the line, copy it, and then in the other browser window, you know, Alt Tab, find the line, hit paste, and then move back to the other one and copy, and move back and then hit paste. And I just happened to be on a call with WebEx, and he's like, "Yeah, I got to do all this." I'm like, "Well, give me 15 minutes." He's like, "What?" And I said, "Never mind. I'm going to call you back in 15 minutes." And so, in that time, I wrote a program that basically just, you know, you'd highlight the text and hit the hotkey, and then would Alt Tab and hit and paste, and then Alt Tab back. And then I actually, so that was one, and then if you hit a different hotkey, it would do 5 in a row. And I knew he didn't want to have anything to do with it at first, but once I showed it to him, he couldn't thank me enough, right? But I'm like, it's amazing how people were, even though they've seen me automate stuff, they'll still say, no, you know, I don't, it's not really, it's not going to take that long. And, you know, I think that's part of the other misconception.
It's amazing. I have, it was one of my earlier books. I can't remember exactly which one, but I call it collecting data into one pot. And in essence, you could be going through web pages or whatever, highlighting something, hitting a hotkey, and it just kept throwing whatever it was into a notepad window. And so everything got collected, URLs, the whole thing. And it was great for any research I was doing for an article. But you're right. It's going back and forth is what'll drive you crazy.
Yeah. I wrote a script that worked in it worked in IE, Firefox, or Chrome. And I could highlight the text, you know, whatever I wanted, and hit copy. And when I would do that, it would copy it, but it would grab the URL, and then it would save the two as an actual hyperlink, you know, the text with the stuff hyperlinked, so I could paste it somewhere. So basically it was like a sourcing thing, right? So I didn't have to take extra steps to go get the source of where I grabbed it from. And that used to save me so much time.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So just to remind people, so it's Jack's AutoHotkey blog is your WordPress site. Is that right? Or blog?
Yeah, it's a WordPress blog.
Yep.
And I usually get something up there about once a week.
Okay. Awesome. And then I'd highly encourage anybody listening to this to check out, looking in Amazon for his Kindle books because they're all Kindle books, right? On Amazon.
Yeah, on Amazon. That's all Amazon does, as far as I know. But if someone's they get a better deal if they go to my site, which is computeredgebooks.com.
Well, you spell computer a little differently, isn't that correct? If I remember right.
Yeah, I think it'll come up anyway. It's COMPUTOREDGE, and then it'll be books.com. But it's easy enough to find. If you're looking for AutoHotkey books, if you do a search for that, generally it'll come up. But I have bundles that I put together where somebody can purchase all the books for one price, or there's a beginner bundle and an intermediate bundle. And the thing is that I call it a library, and once somebody purchases that, then they'll never have to pay for a new edition or an upgraded book. If a new book comes out, the price will go up a little bit for the bundle, but the only thing they'll have to pay is the difference between the old bundle and the new bundle, which say if it was a $10 book, maybe the bundle goes up $5. So for $5, they can actually get the whole bundle again.
Right.
So
And
with all the download links, and it comes in 3 formats. It comes in the Mobi, which is really the Kindle format, PDF, as well as ebooks.
okay, yeah, that was what I was going to mention, because I know
or EPUB.
I know when I bought
format.
mine, yeah, I ended up switching to your site, and I got the PDF instead of Kindle. I love physical printouts of things, and so for me, I got to print it out and I can highlight it and read it.
Yeah, well, the PDFs are pretty popular, and I have it set up for a regular notebook size page. The PDF, so
right?
If you print it.
Awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to add to our interview? Are you working on a new book? Is that what you said with the list views? Was it something with that?
Yeah, I have probably my biggest book yet that has tons of tips that are no longer available on when I closed the magazine website. A lot of those went away. I still have them, but I'm going to publish them also with a lot of the blogs. It'll be my I call it a motley assortment of tips, AutoHotkey tips, and I'm looking to try to plow through that thing. I need to re-edit it and organize it and all that in September, and hopefully have it out before the end of the year. But it'll be my biggest one yet, and hopefully have a little bit more universal appeal, especially when you're looking to do something that might be a little bit more obscure.
Cool. Awesome.
And then that'll get added to the bundle, and the price of the book is probably going to be in the $25 range, but it'll only add $15 to the bundle. So the people that already own bundles will continue to get discounts.
Cool. Good. Awesome.
I'm not real crazy about Amazon. I consider Amazon mostly a marketing site.
Yeah, it's just because I'm selling on Amazon. I mean, I sell AutoHotkey merchandise but I'm looking at actually producing other type of merchandise and selling, in bulk. And it's mostly because just there's such a huge amount of people visiting there, right? It's amazing. The trick is, of course, it's I don't know if you've given this thought. Because I have a Udemy course. Jackie and I have a Udemy course on hot strings, but we're going to put something else together. But we're like, really, what we're going to do is we're not going to target people about AutoHotkey. AutoHotkey is going to be the vessel, the way to do our stuff. But it like you said, the name alone kind of turns people off or confuses them. And it's more about being efficient and automating, a desktop computer. And just being more efficient, I think, and productive is how we'll target people. And mention, of course, you have to mention it's in AutoHotkey, but that's not the main thing that we're going to convey, right? It's more about automating and simplifying your life and speeding up, being more productive.
No, I think that's a good idea. I agree with you. I think that, especially starting with hotkeys and hot strings. Was it a hot string course primarily you're doing? Yeah,
the Udemy one is just hot strings. Hotkeys, I thought about it, but
yeah, it gets more complex quickly.
It does, and hot
strings are pretty straightforward, and a person can write one line and they have instant success. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah,
and they feel good about that. Maybe they'll write a second line and so on.
Right. Yeah, maybe, but yeah, it's and I'm not knocking it, right? I mean, everyone's busy, but it is amazing how, like, I used to at work, I got to where I automated so much of my job. I spent like 30% of my time just learning more how to code and how to do stuff because I had automated so much of my job, right? I invested in myself. I did it all on my own first, so I later would have time to learn more. But yeah, most people, it's kind of funny. I found a guy here in Dallas that he uses AutoHotkey, and so we met up, and he was talking about how he did some stuff, and his boss wants him to do more, but they won't give him a raise and they won't let him do X or Y. And I'm like, well, I offered to teach him, like, in person. I'll show you how to do X, Y, and Z. And he's like, well, my boss won't pay for it. And I'm like, but just do it on your own time, and that, like, it was so foreign to him. It was comical or sad, I guess, is a better way to phrase it. And I'm like,
I think that's a general problem, is that when you look at the percentage of the population that's really willing to invest in themselves and take the time without someone else. Well, nobody told me to do that. That's one of the big ones.
Yeah.
And then, well, I could do that, but they're not going to pay me to do it.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Right.
Maybe you get compensated other ways.
Right.
But it's so common. It's really sad.
Yeah. Well, and then they get mad they don't get a raise, or they don't have vacation or whatever, and you're like, look, you got to make it worth the other person's. You need to be valuable enough to earn it. It's entitlement, like, is so prevalent in our society. But yeah.
No, that's right. You do.
Cool. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. And hopefully you'll get some more visits. I mean, we, in webinars, we'll at times when it's relevant mention your site. And I saw it a couple times. I've seen on your site you've mentioned the webinar, so that's awesome. But Jackie and I have always thought, we want more people to be competing with us, right? We want people to just get on board and learn how to automate things. Really, neither of us are even overly. We love AutoHotkey, but hey, if you know a language where you can do something in that language and it helps you out, right? That's the goal. It's just to make life simpler.
Well, quite frankly, we're not really competing. We have the same objective, which is to get more people to use it. And whether you get someone started or I get someone started, they're much more likely to find either one of us then.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get a better understanding of. How do we get more people to really pick it up, and start using it? And it's tough. It's tough.
It is. I mean, it's almost, you have to look for the right kind of people. And it's not really, I don't see it as convincing people as much as finding the people that are right for it.
Agreed. That's right. The odds of us changing somebody's attitude towards it to start doing it are small. But if we can find people who are already open to doing it, and then we can, that's a really good point.
And then they might impact other people.
Yeah.
I think, like, my blog has grown at a pretty regular rate since I started it a few years ago. And I get about 2,000 unique visitors a month.
Cool.
But it's still growing. And I know as much as anything that's my marketing, is getting those people to come. And actually most of the visitors I get are directly from Google.
Really?
It's not from, I have a certain number of regular readers that drop in whenever I put a new post up. But mostly it's Google. I mean, that's what WordPress tells me anyway.
Yeah, mine is both YouTube and Google, because I my video, I do almost all videos, and I'm trying to look. It looks like no visit. Oh wow, I'm getting a decent amount of visitors per month. I'm at around. It looks like anywhere. Well, right now I had 3,000 last month, but 2,800 before, so 2,900. So,
well, that's pretty damn good.
It is. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that high. It's always interesting to me too, the number of views versus visitors. It's a 3-to-1 like ratio. And this is what Jack and I talked about, of like, well, how many of these are just bots also, right? I don't know.
I think that it depends on the site, but if you're using Google Analytics, I think they weed out the bots. I don't know how you're doing your measurements.
Well, those numbers I was just quoting was from inside, what's it called? The Jetpack from WordPress. But
okay. Well, then I think they might weed out the bots as well.
Okay, but I think I have a link here. I can let me.
So yeah, yours is a WordPress blog as well. Then
right, that's right. Yeah, I just mostly feature video, but yes, it's still WordPress.
If you're getting 3,000 visitors a month, then you're doing better than I am.
Well, again, video people are lazy, right? And so that's why I do video stuff. But yeah.
Well, that's fine. I mean, the problem is I've played with video a little bit, but I didn't like the way it sounded. My voice isn't good for video.
I don't think there's a person on the planet who thinks when they hear their own voice that they think it sounds good. But
I know, but yeah, it's overall, I had to keep redoing videos just to get one up.
Yeah.
So it was,
see, I don't aim for perfection. So I usually do one take, and if I goof up, I goof up. Part of me, I like showing people that, like you've seen in our web, I don't know. Have you attended any of the webinars? I don't know if I asked you that.
I haven't attended one, but I did watch part of one of them.
So some of ours, we'll do live, testing of code, and things don't work, and we got to troubleshoot. And then, like, I think that's a great way to show people also don't get frustrated and quit right away when you're trying to do stuff and it doesn't work, because, hey, it happens to everybody, no matter how good you are, it takes a little bit of work.
That's right. Well, absolutely. So you have a lot of videos on your site then?
Yeah, I have, I think, roughly 350 videos, which I'd say like 80% are AutoHotkey. I used to do stuff on SPSS, which is the statistical program that I learned, but I almost never do any of those anymore, just because I got bored with statistics. Yeah.
Well, AutoHotkey can be more interesting anyway. You get more variety.
Yeah, it can. That's the thing is people laugh, and I'm like, almost everything I do, the second I realize I'm going to do it again, like I'll find a way to automate it.
Yeah,
it makes work fun to me, right? I can take something mundane and make it fun, just because it's also, that's part of my passion, is the whole problem solving, right? I like to figure out how to make something work, and then save time. And then of course I can just reuse it, but.
I think that's what keeps me going on writing the blog, is that every time I'm actually writing short AutoHotkey routines, and it challenges me just enough and then I get it done and I can write about it and break it up into pieces or whatever. Well,
again, kudos to you on that regular expression book, because I had before I read it, I had already been playing with them. And then I was it was one of my vacations where I was in Las Vegas visiting my dad, and I had some downtime. And so I'm like, I'm going to get that book and work through it. And as with almost anything, right, even though you play with something, when you work through a book that covers, a lot more aspects than what you actually had a need for at the time, you learn a lot more than what you do when you have a need. And but you did a great job of, like you said, it's a complex topic that, even when I talk to a lot of people that work in IT, or even some programmers, and they don't even know what a regular expression is, I'm shocked.
No, you'd be surprised, because it's not like regular programming, and to really get good at. In fact, I have to refer back to the book myself when I'm looking at specific things, or to the documentation online.
It's a use it or lose it, boy. Yeah.
You have to be doing it all the time to really get it down.
Yeah.
I use that Ryan's regex tester all the time. That thing's great.
Yeah, I used to use it, and now I forget I'm trying to remember the name of it. I use a different one now, but I have used that one before, and it's great. The other one I use, it's similar overall. It's just a little prettier. That's all.
Yeah. Well, whatever works. That's
right.
what I say.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you again so much for being on the call, and have a great day.
Oh, okay.
There.